तो दो वेक्टर्स का प्रोडक्ट दो टाइप का हो सकता है, डॉट और स्केलर प्रोडक्ट एंड क्रॉस और वेक्टर प्रोडक्ट. Let us see them one by one. So, dot product or scalar product means the product of two vectors which is a scalar itself. जो खुद क्या है, स्केलर है, but this is not the definition of dot product. ये डॉट प्रोडक्ट की डेफिनेशन नहीं है. What is the definition of dot product? डॉट प्रोडक्ट की डेफिनेशन क्या है फिर? Suppose this is a vector A and this is a vector B. You want to find out the dot product of these two vectors. इन दो vectors का आपको क्या चाहिए? Dot product चाहिए. So first of all, you should know the angle between those two vectors. उन दो vectors के बीच का आपको angle मालूम होना चाहिए. So suppose this is vector A, right? And this is vector B, and suppose the angle between them is theta. Then A dot B is defined as A और B का dot product जो है, that is equal to mod A, मतलब magnitude of vector A, into mod B, magnitude of vector B, into cos theta. Or the same thing can be written as A dot B is equal to A B cos theta. Magnitude of vector A, simply you can write A, magnitude of vector B, B into cos theta. This is the definition of dot product. The dot product of two vectors is defined as the product of, dot product of two vectors is defined as the product of, ये product है ना, A into B into cos theta, product of क्या क्या, the magnitudes of the two vectors, दोनों vectors के magnitudes का product, the magnitudes of the two vectors and cosine of the angle between them. तो दो vectors का magnitude और उनके बीच के एंगल का कोसाइन, इन सब के प्रोडक्ट को बोलते हैं डॉट प्रोडक्ट ऑफ टू वेक्टर्स. दैट इज डेफिनेशन ऑफ डॉट प्रोडक्ट. द डॉट प्रोडक्ट ऑफ टू वेक्टर्स इज डिफाइंड एज द प्रोडक्ट ऑफ magnitudes of the two vectors and cosine of the angle between them. A dot B is equal to A B cos theta. That is the definition of dot product. And this dot product itself, suppose if it is C, then there is no arrow about it, means the dot product is a scalar quantity. The scalar product or dot product obeys the commutative law of multiplication. The dot product obeys commutative law of multiplication. Means what? P dot Q will be equal to Q dot P. P dot Q is equal to Q dot P. That is called as commutative law of multiplication, and that is the first characteristic of dot product. First property, first characteristic of dot product is the dot product obeys commutative law of multiplication. First characteristic. So, first characteristic says that P dot Q is equal to Q dot P. Second characteristic says that the dot product obeys associative law of multiplication. Associative law of multiplication means what? P dot Q plus R. P dot Q plus R will be equal to P dot Q plus P dot R. This is called distributive law of multiplication. So the dot product obeys distributive law of multiplication. That is the second characteristic, second property of dot product. The third property, it is about the angles between the two vectors. Suppose the two vectors are A and B, and theta is the angle between them. Then if theta is equal to 0 degree, theta is equal to 0 degree means the two vectors are in the same direction, or they are parallel vectors. Theta is equal to 0 degree means the two vectors are parallel vectors. So if two vectors are parallel to each other, means theta is equal to 0 degree, then what will happen? A dot B is equal to AB cos theta, or you can say it is AB into cos of theta कितना है 0, and cos of 0 is 1, means A dot B is equal to AB. So first point in the third characteristic में पहला point, if two vectors are parallel to each other, theta equal to 0 degree, if two vectors are parallel to each other, then their dot product, A dot B, their dot product is equal to product of their magnitudes, magnitude of A into magnitude of B. The dot product is equal to product of their magnitudes. That is the first point in third characteristic. Second point says, if theta is equal to 180 degree, theta is equal to 180 degree means what? The vectors are in opposite directions, means they are anti-parallel. The vectors are anti-parallel. Then A dot B will be equal to AB cos 180. How much is cos 180? Cos of 180 is -1. So A dot B will be equal to AB into -1, that is minus AB. So if two vectors are anti-parallel, then their dot product is equal to minus of product of their magnitudes. Second point in the third characteristic. Third point in this third characteristic, if theta is equal to 90 degree, if the vectors are perpendicular to each other, then A dot B will be AB cos theta, means cos 90 degree. Cos 90 कितना होता है 0. So cos 90 is 0. AB into 0 will become 0, means A dot B is equal to 0. So if two vectors are perpendicular to each other, their dot product is equal to 0. So that is the third characteristic of dot product. The fourth characteristic is about unit vectors. What will be the dot product of unit vectors? Fourth characteristic, I dot I, मतलब I को I से प्रोडक्ट किया, I को I से मल्टीप्लाई किया, that is called self dot product. Self dot product of I will be equal to, क्या होगा? Magnitude of vector I into magnitude of vector I into cos of angle between them. Vector I का magnitude कितना है 1, because I is a unit vector, into 1 magnitude of I into magnitude of I, 1 into 1, into cos of I और I के बीच का एंगल कितना है? 0. So cos of 0 degree, and cos of 0 is 1. So 1 into 1 into 1, that is equal to 1. Means I dot I is equal to 1. So the first point in fourth characteristic says that I dot I is equal to J dot J is equal to K dot K is equal to 1. That is the first point in the fourth characteristic. I dot I is equal to J dot J is equal to K dot K is equal to 1. And the second point, I dot J. I dot J कितना रहेगा? That will be equal to magnitude of I, I'm sorry, that is 1 into magnitude of J, 1 into cos of, what is angle between I and J? I is unit vector on x axis, J is unit vector on y axis. तो उनके बीच का एंगल कितना है? 90 degree. And how much is cos 90? 0. So this everything will become 0. So the second point in fourth characteristic says that I dot J is equal to J dot K is equal to K dot I is equal to, इसके उलट भी लिख सकते हैं हम, J dot I is equal to K dot J is equal to I dot K is equal to 0. So I dot J is equal to J dot K is equal to K dot I, or reverse of it is equal to 0. So this is the fourth property, fourth characteristic of dot product. और 3 characteristics बाकी हैं, that we shall see in the next lecture. So have a nice time. Good day. Bye bye.